In 1955, a junior draftsman in Quincy, Illinois, never told the woman he was courting that he loved her until the night he proposed. He did not need the words. He walked her home along the dark side of the street for 11 months. He warmed the car before she reached it. He noticed she was cold a full minute before she did. She married him that spring, and at the reception, her mother said she had known since the third evening, watching from the kitchen, that this was a man who paid attention. He was not handsome. He had a borrowed overcoat and $40. What he had was a set of quiet gestures drilled into him at a kitchen table by a father who never explained why, only that a man speaks loudest with the things he does without a word. Most of what that draftsman knew died with his generation. They moved through the world differently, not with lines or scripts or self-help books, but with gestures carved into them by parents who knew the kind of man they were building. Those gestures made women feel safe, chosen, and seen, without a man ever announcing he was trying. It was not smoothness. It was a craft, taught at dinner tables and enforced without discussion, worn so deep that the men who lived it never thought of themselves as charming. They thought they were being raised right. Then 1970 arrived, and we decided being raised right was the same as being repressed. We threw the whole code away, not because it stopped working, because we stopped wanting to look like men who needed to try. Number 23 on this list took less than a second, made no sound, and told a woman she had been thought of before she walked through a door. Number 16 contradicts almost everything young men are told about women today, and it is the one women remembered for decades. And number 2, the gesture fathers enforced more quietly and fiercely than any other, is now taught to executives at a weekend retreat that costs $4,000 a seat. The old way cost a father one example and a son a lifetime of repeating it. These 30 gestures were not about being smooth. They were about making one woman feel like the most cared-for person in any room she stood in. The difference between a man a woman forgot by morning and a man she thought about for 30 years, none of it was loud. None of it asked for thanks. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 30 quiet gestures 1950s men made that made women feel truly special. Number 30, the warmed car. On a cold morning you went out alone, started the engine and let it run until the chill left the seats before she reached the door. A foundry worker in Duluth did it for his wife through the early 50s, scraping ice in the dark while she finished her coffee. She never saw the cold you stood in. She only felt the warmth you left behind. A woman who slid into a warm seat on a freezing morning knew she had been thought of before she woke. The warmth was the message. The cold was the proof. Number 29, the street side. On any sidewalk, you walked nearest the traffic and let her walk sheltered by the buildings. A streetcar man in St. Paul switched sides without a word at every corner through 1953. Whatever came off that road came through you first. She never had to ask, never had to see you decide. She simply felt, block after block, that something had been placed between her and harm. You moved like a wall that loved her. She walked the whole way home and never once felt the road.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us who still believe a good name and good manners mean something. It's the lost gentleman's code, the old-fashioned manners American gentlemen once lived by. The kind that make you the man everyone respects, welcome in any room you walk into. But these ways are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't spend another year being the man people overlook. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
Number 28. The coat around her shoulders. The moment the evening turned cold, you had the coat off your back and around hers before a word about the weather was spoken. A railroad man in Altoona did it for 40 years, starting in 1949. Comfort given before it is asked for is worth 10 times comfort given after. A woman remembered the man who noticed she was cold before she did. The coat was warm, but that was not the gift. The gift was that you had been watching her closely enough to feel her chill as your own. Number 27. The hand down from the car. When she stepped down from a high running board or up from a low seat, your hand was already there, open and steady, palm up. A taxi man's son in Newark offered it 1,000 times before it stopped feeling like a thing to remember. You never gripped. You only steadied. A woman who set her fingers in your palm felt, for 1 second, that her balance was your concern. It was 4 inches of help she did not strictly need. That was exactly why it meant something. Number 26. The door reached first. You saw the door coming and got there ahead of her. No flourish, no waiting for thanks, holding it until she was through. A grocer in Toledo taught his son in 1951 to reach it for the old, the young, the stranger, and the woman alike. Held for women only, it was a performance, and women could always tell. Held for everyone, it was simply who you were. The door cost you nothing and a second of your time. To her, it said the day would open easier wherever you walked beside her. Number 25. The jacket over the wet bench. When a bench was damp, you had the jacket off and down first, so she could sit clean. A mill worker in Lawrence did it on a rained-on park bench in 1954 and walked his girl home with a stain across the back of his only good coat. He never said a word about the coat. She never forgot the bench. A man who would ruin his own jacket so a woman could sit told her plainly where she ranked. The stain washed out by Tuesday. The memory lasted the rest of her life. Number 24. The threshold held. At any doorway you paused half a step, opened the way, and let her cross first into the room. A schoolteacher's son in Columbus learned it in 1956 until he could not have barged ahead of a woman if he tried. It was the smallest courtesy a man owned, a single held breath at a door. A woman who always entered first felt, without thinking about it, that she was being welcomed into every room rather than trailing into it. You went second on purpose. Going second was how you told her she came first. Number 23. The hand at the small of the back. In a crowded room, you set one hand lightly at the small of her back and steered a clear path for her through the crush. A salesman in Indianapolis did it at every packed function in 1955. His son called the gesture a promise, spoken through the palm. I have you, follow me. Nothing here will jostle you. A woman moved through a packed room as though it had parted for her. The touch was barely there. What she felt was the certainty that she could not be lost in any crowd you stood in. Here is what nobody says out loud. A man before 1965 was taught to spend his attention on a woman freely, in 100 small ways she was never meant to count, expecting nothing back. Then we decided attention was a currency. We told a generation of young men to hold it in reserve, to play it cool, to give nothing first. What we built was not mystery. It was 2 people across a table, each waiting for the other to care first, each going home alone and calling it strategy. The old gestures risked a little tenderness on every ordinary evening and were repaid 100-fold in love. We called that risk foolish, We kept our hands in our pockets. And we wonder now why a woman can sit across from a man all night and feel completely alone. Number 22, the umbrella tilted her way. When the rain came down, you put the umbrella over her, not yourself, and walked the rest of the way with one wet shoulder. A bank clerk in Providence did it on every rainy walk through 1953, arriving with half his coat soaked and never mentioning it. She stayed dry. You did not. A woman who reached shelter dry while the man beside her dripped understood exactly how the umbrella had been held. The wet shoulder was the whole confession. You said nothing, and she heard everything. Number 21, the chair drawn. At any table, her chair came first. You drew it back, waited, and eased it in as she sat, taking your own seat only once she was settled. A hotel man in Kansas City taught his son in 1952 that no man at his table sat while a woman stood. A woman felt the small attention as tenderness, a hand at her chair when she had not asked. It was the kind of care that cost almost nothing and was noticed every single time it was missing. Number 20, the outside seat. At a booth, you took the seat facing the room and gave her the one against the wall, so the noise and the strangers were at your back, not hers. A printer in Hartford did it without comment in 1954, putting himself between his wife and the door. She faced calm. You faced the crowd. A woman seated this way felt sheltered without quite knowing why the room felt softer from her chair. You took the hard view so she could have the quiet one, and never said that was why. Number 19, the eyes that did not wander. When a prettier woman crossed the room, you did not follow her with your eyes. They stayed on the woman you were with. A pharmacist in Lincoln taught his son in 1955 that a wandering eye was the cruelest thing a man could do without a word. The man who never glanced past her told her, in the only language that cannot lie, that for this hour, no one else existed. Attention cannot be faked. You gave all of yours to her. Number 18, the small need tended. The empty glass refilled, the dropped glove returned, the chair shifted out of the draft. You saw the small thing and handled it before she could ask. A shopkeeper in Lexington taught his son in 1954 to watch the woman, not himself. A woman noticed when a man noticed. It was not servility, it was attention turned outward, the rarest thing in any room. The small needs were a test no one announced, and most men failed it without knowing it was given. You passed by looking at her instead of waiting to be looked at. Number 17, the praise that was not for her face. Here is the one that contradicts everything young men hear today. You did not lead with her looks. You noticed her wit, her kindness, the steady way she carried a hard moment, and said so. A lawyer in Charleston told his son in 1956 that any fool could see a pretty face. Telling a woman she was beautiful only proved you had eyes. Telling her she was sharp proved you had been listening. The first she had heard 100 times and forgotten by morning. The second she carried for 30 years. Number 16, the arm on uneven ground. On ice, on stairs, on a curb in the dark, you put the arm out for her to take, steady and unhurried. A dock worker in Baltimore offered it on every winter sidewalk in 1950, an arm like a railing she could trust. She never slipped. She never had to watch her own feet. A woman on the arm of a man like that could look up, look around, look at him, because the ground had been made someone else's concern. The arm asked for nothing. It simply stood there, offered every time the footing turned hard. In 1958, a journeyman tailor in Cincinnati spent the first 10 minutes of every fitting talking about anything but the suit, the man's wife, his work, the wedding the suit was bought for. His apprentice asked why he gave away 10 minutes of billable time. The tailor said the 10 minutes was the work. The suit was only the part he charged for. 60 years later, American companies spend $14 billion a year teaching salesmen the warmth that Taylor gave away for free. We did not get more efficient. We took the human part of every meeting and decided it was the part we could cut. His customers stayed 30 years. We click a button and pray a person answers. Number 15. The cold noticed first. Before she shivered, before she said a thing, you had already seen the goose flesh on her arm and were reaching to do something about it. A clerk in Des Moines watched his wife that closely through the 50s, reading her comfort off her skin before she read it off her own. A woman who never had to ask to be warm felt watched over in the gentlest sense of the word. The noticing was the gift. The coat or the closed window was only proof that a man had been paying attention she had stopped expecting from anyone. Number 14. The carried weight. The bags, the heavy box, the load up the stairs, and you reached for it before she could brace to lift. A dock worker's son in Cleveland was taught in 1952 that strength was given to a man to be spent on others, not displayed. A woman who never strained beside a man felt cared for in a way no words could match. The weight moved from her hands to yours so quietly she half forgot she had been carrying anything. Strength shown off impressed no one. Strength quietly spent impressed her every time. Number 13. The lowered voice. When she began to speak, you turned the radio down and brought your own voice quiet, so the whole table leaned toward her words. A pipe fitter in Youngstown reached for the dial without looking in 1955, clearing the room of noise so a woman could be heard. A woman whose quietest word landed in a hushed room felt that what she said carried weight. Most men talk over a room. You turned the room down so one person in it could be heard. Number 12. The bad day carried quietly. Your own long day, your sore back, your worry over money, you set it down at the door and did not lay it on her evening. A streetcar operator in Cleveland taught his son in 1951, that complaint is contagious, and the man who spreads it shrinks everyone's night to enlarge his own. A woman beside a man who carried his own weather felt steadier for it, lighter, free to have her own evening. You were not pretending to be happy. You were refusing to hand a woman a burden she had not earned. Number 11. The best portion given, the last good slice, the warm end of the bread, the chair nearest the fire, you gave it to her, quietly, as though it had always been hers. A mill hand in Lowell never took the first or the best of anything in 1950, and his son never once saw the man notice he was going without. A woman handed the good portion by a man who took the lesser felt cherished in a way no compliment reached. You did not announce the sacrifice. You made it invisible, which is the only way a sacrifice becomes a gift. Number 10. The small thing remembered. Her usual order, the flower she liked, the song that stopped her on the radio. You remembered it and brought it back to her weeks later without being asked. A pharmacist in Akron kept these things in his head in 1953, the way other men kept account numbers. A woman whose offhand preference came back to her in your hands knew she had been heard the first time, when she did not even know she was speaking to someone listening. It was proof that an ordinary thing she said had been worth keeping. Number 9. The hat off. The hat stayed on in the street and came off the instant a woman passed, or the moment you crossed a threshold where one stood. A foundry man in Gary corrected his son with one glance in 1953, and the boy's hand was at the brim before the look had finished. It was a small surrender, repeated daily, that told a woman she had changed the air of the room simply by entering it. The hat itself was nothing. Lifting it was a man saying with his hand that her presence was worth the only formal gesture he owned. Number 8. The walk to the lit door. You did not say goodnight from the curb. You walked her all the way to the door, waited until the light came on inside and the latch turned, and only then walked home. A cabinet maker in Grand Rapids did this for every woman in 1949, calling the leaving the part people remembered because it was the part you did not have to do. A woman felt safe. A father at the window felt sure. The welcome could be politeness. The walk to the lit door, for no reward, was only ever sincerity. In 1956, a county study in rural Ohio tried to measure why some men were trusted by strangers in seconds while others were not. The men rated most trustworthy by women they had just met all shared the same plain habits: the steady eye, the offered arm, the hat, the small attentions paid before anyone asked. The examiners expected charm to be the difference. It was not. The difference was care made visible in small, repeated acts. The finding read like something a grandfather already knew. The gestures worked, not because they were old, but because they were true. A woman can always tell a man performing from a man paying attention. Number 7. The steadying hand at the step. Down from a porch, off a high stair, out of a doorway with a drop, you had the hand at her elbow before she reached the edge. A carpenter in Richmond offered it on every uneven step in 1954, so quietly she often did not see him move. She never stumbled. A woman who felt a hand arrive exactly when the ground fell away learned that someone was watching her path a half-second ahead of her own feet. Being there first, before she needed you, was the whole of it. Number 6. The early arrival. On time was late. You were there before she was, every time, so she never stood waiting or wondering. A railroad man in Sacramento lived by the timetable in 1950 and raised his son to treat every meeting like a departing train. A woman who never had to wait for a man, never had to check the clock and feel the doubt creep in, felt her time held as precious as your own. Lateness says your comfort came first. Earliness said hers did. Number 5. The patience to let her finish. When she was speaking, you did not climb over her words to insert your own. You waited until she was fully, truly done. A foreman in Akron enforced it at his table in 1955, raising one finger when a son cut in. A woman who could finish a whole thought, unhurried in your company, felt something rare, that her words were worth the silence you kept for them. You were not being slow. You were paying her the loudest respect a quiet man can pay. Number 4. The whole presence. When you were with her, you were with her. The paper down, the worries shelved, the door of your attention closed to everything else in the world. A grocer in Lexington taught his son in 1949 that the cheapest insult is the wandering kind of attention, and the greatest compliment is the undivided. A woman who had your full presence for 1 hour remembered it longer than any gift you could buy. Presence cannot be performed. You were either fully there with her or somewhere else pretending. She always knew which. Number 3, the look that stayed. When she spoke, your eyes came to her face and stayed there, for as long as it took her to know she had been seen. A tool and die maker in Hamtramck taught his son in 1950 that you look at a person until they feel it, and not a second less. A woman, under a gaze like that, felt, maybe for the first time all week, that she was not invisible. This was the gesture fathers enforced above all others. The duration did not matter. The choosing to look was everything. Number 2, keep the small promise. What you told her you would do, you did. The call you said you would make, the hour you said you would come, the thing you swore was handled. A machinist in Bridgeport taught his son in 1953 that a man who keeps the small promises is handed the large ones unasked. A woman learns whether your word holds not from grand vows, but from the tiny ones no one would have blamed you for bending. Each kept promise was a brick. She stopped doubting you one quiet, delivered word at a time. Number 1, see her. That is all of it. No method, no clever exception. You noticed the woman in front of you, her mood, her tiredness, the thing she was not saying, and let her feel, for that evening, that she was the only person in the world worth noticing. A school teacher in Terre Haute told her son in 1951 that the whole secret of making a woman feel special was to truly see her, when almost no one bothered to look. A woman did not melt for the handsome man or the rich one. She melted for the one who saw her. Every other gesture on this list was only this one wearing different clothes. The warmed car was seeing her with your hands, the held gaze, seeing her with your eyes. Learn this one, and you barely need the other 29. None of these gestures required a charm school, a coach, or a single dollar. They required a home where someone lived them in front of a boy too young to know he was being taught. The generation before 1965 understood something we have spent 50 years unlearning, that a woman is not one with words, and never was. She is one the way water shapes stone, by the same small, quiet motion, repeated until it becomes the landscape itself. The warmed seat, the dry shoulder, the held gaze, the walk to the lit door. We called these gestures stiff, old-fashioned, the mark of men who could not simply be themselves. We replaced them with being ourselves and called it honesty, and now we cannot understand why a woman can sit across from a man all evening and feel that no one is there. The gestures were never lost to time. They were set down by sons who thought they had outgrown them. The man is still standing in the doorway, hat in hand, waiting to show another how it was done. The only thing missing is someone willing to stand where he stood and mean it,